Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Nees. I work at Walsh Construction Company. We're here today to talk about building success. Can everybody hear me? Okay, awesome. Thank you. We're here to talk to you today, talking about building in rural communities and the key to community-centered development. We have a great panel here today of professionals, all working in projects and come from different aspects on these projects in rural communities. At the end of our time together, I think some of the key takeaways is really having great development strategies for your own projects, some lessons learned, some insights from real world projects, and then just, again, providing tools for your own success. We've got 3 case studies that our team has worked on. A lot of us have worked on these projects together in some capacity or another, so we'll be referencing those projects today. The Trillium House project that was completed about 1.5 years ago in Warrenton, Oregon, with Northwest Housing Alternatives was the project owner, Walsh Construction, number of different funders on the project. Ultimately, it was 1 building, 4 stories, 42 new apartment homes in Warrenton. Stratus Village project, which is ongoing. It is a 175 unit project, some garden style walk-up apartment homes in McMinnville, Oregon, with the Housing Authority of Yamhill County, Structure Development, and Walsh Construction, providing some much needed affordable housing in McMinnville. And also the Clatsop Behavioral Health Project, housing and services in Astoria, beautiful site right underneath the bridge in Astoria. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, their name, their role in their organization, their experience on rural projects, what projects they're working on, and ultimately answering the question of what does community-centered development mean to them. So myself, Nees, currently I'm an operations manager, senior project manager for a long time at Walsh Construction. Was able to work on the Trillium House project with Mary Bradshaw about 1.5 years ago, and then also currently working on the Stratus Village project. Worked on various projects throughout the state of Oregon, in Hermiston, Lincoln City, Warrenton, and got to know a lot of different communities and subcontractors and businesses throughout the state. Community-centered development really means to me getting to know folks, getting to know who's in the community, whether it's the jurisdiction, the inspectors, the subcontractors, the businesses, and try to find ways to bring them into the projects, get buy-in on the project, and then ultimately, lead to the successful building when we're done and gone for years and decades to come. So really find a way to bring people in and still achieve the end goal at the end of the day. Next up is Vicki. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Vicki Weibarden. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of Yamhill County in McMinnville, and we are building the Stratus Village project. As Jay said, it's 175 units of affordable housing. It's the largest affordable housing complex in our county, and it's the first one in our town since 2008, which was one of our projects as well. So, community development is getting the inputs of the community. So not just looking at statistically where the needs are, but looking at the community itself and getting input from stakeholders and looking at what the culture of the area is as well, and trying to bring in as many different partners as you can to help with it.
Thanks, Vicki. My name is Mike Andrews, and I'm the principal with Structure Development Advisors. We're a development and consulting firm based here in Portland, Oregon. We provide development services for nonprofits and housing authorities throughout Oregon, a little bit in Washington. We also consult nationally with housing authorities and nonprofits on finance and HUD matters. So I've had the opportunity to work with Vicki and her team, and Jay and his team on Stratus. One of the things that Stratus illustrates that I think community-centered development means to us is this idea of trying to add the most value in the community with your particular project. And so figuring that out is part of the early work that you do, and we'll touch on this throughout our presentation. But figuring out how your project is going to add value. Clearly, if you're building affordable housing, the fundamentals are you're providing more units of affordable housing. But what are the other things? And particularly in rural communities, who else do you need to help you get that housing built? And by extension, add additional value to that community. So I think every project is unique, they're all situational. I think figuring that out is what it means for us and part of the enjoyment of smaller rural projects.
Mary?
Good morning. I'm Mary Bradshaw. I'm a senior housing developer for Northwest Housing Alternatives. And as Jay said, we worked on Trillium together, but a little bit about NHA. We do work in 16 different counties across the state of Oregon. Almost half our portfolio is in rural communities, and I'd be remiss if I didn't call out some of the amazing NHA folks that are here in the audience today that are all part of NHA's approach to working in rural communities. I think one of the key things is, like so many people, I'm just kind of curious, how many developer, owner, or operators are kind of in the room? Okay, so there's a few. So NHA as a nonprofit, we're a long-term owner in the communities that we go into, and that's really important. So to me, community-centered development is, if we're coming into a new community, we don't come in with sharp elbows. I love that term, Jay, that you taught me that. We don't come in sharp. We want to know who are the people there, who is the jurisdiction, who are the community service partners, who are the people with the greatest need around housing, because those are the people that know what the community needs, and that's how we build partnership. And then we design and build projects that are centered in what the community needs and what the people who need the housing need. And so to me, really that core value is about long-term partnership and becoming part of the community.
Hi, my name is Brandy Pine. I'm with Walsh Construction. I'm a project manager. For me, I'm working on jobs out of town. Currently on the Astoria job, but the community-centered focus for me as the contractor side of things is really trying to engage with the local contractors and get them involved in the project and taking ownership, which usually trickles down into kind of the fiber of the community and getting to know and make relationships with others at the permitting office or other parts of town, and so that there's sort of buy-in on the job, because you don't always do the fancy sexy jobs. We're doing some that maybe are not the ones that people are real thrilled to have happening in town. And so by getting buy-in from others in town and being part of the job, it really can help kind of give that ownership to the team and help with that impact that maybe we have.
Okay, thanks, Brandy. Just to clear on the format, I'll go through and I'll ask our panel a series of questions, and then we'll have 10 to 15 minutes or so at the end for questions and answers. So first question I'd ask to the panel, what early stage decisions can, you know, make or break a project in a rural project?
For us, it was finding land. There's a really difficult time finding land in our area, and one of the ways we did that is we talked to everybody. So I was on the Affordable Housing Committee for the city of McMinnville, getting to know the planning department, getting to know the director of the planning department, our mayor, and just letting everyone know we're looking for land, and we want to do this. And it was actually our planning director who found the site that we ended up purchasing and said, hey, this is available. We looked at it and it worked out really well. And then they also gave us names of, hey, talk to this person, talk to this person. So getting that land, finding the right place, and then finding the right people to connect with was a huge thing in the beginning.
Thanks, Vicki. In our experience with Stratus and other projects as well, I think rural projects, unlike projects in urban areas, require a little bit more patience. So Stratus is a 175 unit project, which is not small in the city of McMinnville. And so capitalizing that project took a lot of resources. And when you're in a rural community, you don't have the benefit of large entitlements or locally generated resources. So you've got to knock on more doors or find more partners to cobble together all the resources needed. So your development team needs to be a team that is okay with it requiring some patience. So your design team might be on board really early to help you conceptualize this idea and maybe put it on paper in a way that you can share it with others to get their support. But they're going to be on the project for quite some time because it's going to take a while to bring all those partners together. You need to build a broad group of folks who are willing to help you. So Vicki had mentioned the role that the city and others played in identifying the land. But building those partnerships, finding those friends, finding those local champions who are willing to help you advocate for resources. That was really important on Stratus. We were fortunate at the time that the mayor of the city of McMinnville was a huge supporter of affordable housing. And she did a lot of work on her own time to help us identify partnerships with the local tribe, with the city. She served as a kind of peer and talking to the county to get their support. So finding those folks that can help is really important. You know, it would be general contractor as well. And so I think with a project, when a project is needing to apply for your resource, particularly with the state, you need to generally have your contractor on board. And so you might apply and you don't know if you're going to get funded. It might take you a year. In this case of Stratus, we had to apply a couple of times to Oregon Housing to fully be funded. So having a contractor who will know that your timeline might stretch and being able to talk with them about that, and so you know who's going to be on your team when your project actually comes around to starting construction. You know, they've got a lot of other projects going on, so being able to talk to folks who will have some consistency from your concept through when you actually start construction is important. So you can have that consistency in your overall thinking for the project. So patience, bringing together your team, I think are two big pieces of the rule.
I think one of the other key things when you're working in a new community, in our case, is understanding what are the challenges and what are the opportunities in the community that you're working with. When taking Trillium as an example, Warrenton is fortunate in a way that a lot of coastal towns are not, in the sense that they have, by coastal standards, they're land rich. They've got land that can be developed into housing, and they want to develop housing. But they're about 5,500 people in the population, so it's not a city that's generating a tremendous amount of revenue for infrastructure upgrades, or even has money to be able to be doing large-scale planning efforts. So in the case of Trillium House, it was the first development in a 19-acre parcel that the city has that could expand and turn into over 300 to 400 units of housing and other support structures. But to know that you've got land and 19 acres and to get to 300 plus units, that's a big lift. That takes a lot of planning, that takes a lot of, you know, figuring out everything. How do we get power, water, sewer in there? So where I felt that early connection with the city and really understanding and sitting down with them, what are the challenges that you're facing? And even to the point, and I saw you sneak in, Stuart, we had a local architect, Stuart Evans, who was very involved with the city and understanding, and Stuart had to do a little bit more than just doing the design for the building. He had to actually help do a conceptual master plan for the 19 acres just to be in partnership with the city to figure out, like, all right, you know, how many housing units can we get on there? What power upgrades do we need to do? What storm and sanitary sewer upgrades do we need to do? And even to the point of figuring out traffic and how that was gonna impact. Anybody who's familiar with Warrenton knows there's that big box intersection on 101 with Home Depot and Walmart and all these other areas. Well, we're right behind that. So you can imagine a lot of traffic coming in for the commercial zone. And then now we're starting to add all these housing units. How are you gonna be able to move people through the community? So it was really that early contact, because quite frankly, when we first started to walk into the city, they were like, who are you? You're from Portland? We don't wanna talk to you. And it's like, hold up, you know, I think I actually went to City Hall and sat and waited till the city manager could talk to me. And it's understanding that, oh, maybe this project could be a catalyst to help this 19 acres actually develop and the city develop and be able to meet their housing goals. So you're gonna hear me say over and over again, partnership, partnership, partnership. But the people who live in the community and work in the community, they know their community. And it's getting to meet with them and listen to them to figure out what are the challenges, but also what are the opportunities.
Okay, no, thank you, Mary. So, you know, talking about partnerships and partnership with the local jurisdiction, with the city, and helping them realize their goals and plans, kind of feeds into our next question of what partnerships have been the most transformational in this rural work?
So when I became executive director, I started looking at things and seeing grants and saying, hey, do we want to do these services? Do we want to do these services? And I started looking around and saying, you know what, we can't be the expert in everything. We have to have partners be the experts. Let's combine resources and everybody do what they're good at. So keeping my focus narrow, when we started Stratus, it was kind of the same concept. It was, let's find the people that do what they do and get them on board as partners. And then just looking around the community and trying to find, again, talking to everyone and finding out where the needs are, where people can help us. And one of our biggest partnerships is we have a partnership with the Confederate Tribe of Grand Ronde, where they gave us a grant for the first offsite tribal housing that they've invested in. And that's been a huge undertaking as far as just getting all the details worked out and transforming the project and making that project go forward. And it's very exciting too to look at those and, you know, how can we help all of our communities. So the other thing I did was I want the community building to be used for the entire city. I don't want it to be just for residents at that project. So, you know, all of our partners, we've got a partner office that people can use if they want to. We've got the Confederate Tribes have a office there that they can use for, if they want to use it for residents of the project, they can, or I'm hoping it will be for their members that live outside the areas too, away from the Grand Ronde area. So just, you know, in our community room, and, you know, how can this be a truly community-centered area, and look at all the partners and what they can bring to the table and help us with.
Thanks, Vicky. So, a couple more examples of Stratus to build on the comments about the partnership with the tribe. It was a pretty extraordinary partnership that took a while to cultivate. We spent a lot of time spending time with the tribal council, with the leadership of the tribe, trying to understand what was their interest in the project, what was important to them. The project in McMinnville had the benefit of being close to their reservation. And so they knew that they had a lot of members who wanted to live in McMinnville, maybe didn't want to live in tribal housing on the reservation. So they wanted more, they had a need for housing, and they thought they had members who wanted to live in McMinnville. So it was very interesting to them. But they also had some things that they wanted to have as well. In particular, having tribal members housed. And so we spent a lot of time with them trying to figure out how to navigate some of the rules around how to do that. So they used they used their own resources. So they're a tribal housing authority, but they did not use federal tribal housing money in this project. So they used their own resources, which was both helpful because we didn't have some of those rules, but also we had to spend a lot of time working through fair housing matters with them. We ultimately got there, and because we had spent time just talking about the project and figuring out how to make this something that wasn't just a transaction, but something that was really meaningful to them. Vicki had mentioned that they have an office space on the site. We're working with tribal artists to have art installations on the project. So it's something that's a little bit more than just them sending money, but it's something that we're doing together. On this project, we also have a partnership with the local CCO. So they provided resources to the project, and so there's a healthcare overlay. We also have agricultural tax credits on the project. And we struck a partnership early with both growers and farmer organizations in the community to try to understand what are the housing needs of the organization. And we did this prior to the current administration and prior to what's going on in the world. And I think those partnerships are still helpful to us as we navigate this lay of the land and trying to figure out how will farm workers access this housing. So we established those partnerships early through the relationship largely that Vicki and her staff had, and got them bought into the idea of the project at the conceptual stage. And again, they had patience. They knew that this was not going to happen overnight. It would take a little bit of time, but they were with us all along.
So, as I alluded to in my last kind of answer to the question, we weren't exactly received with open arms when we first started Trillium. And it was difficult because we were on a timeline. I'm totally owning as a developer. You have a timeline, you have a schedule, we need to deliver, we need to push. Yet we also had to slow down because we knew we weren't going to be able to move forward unless we could kind of break through and build that partnership. And one of the key factors to that, to kind of dispel, that being this out-of-towner, we realized in our conversations that the city hadn't been treated very well by some of the big box stores and owners who'd come in. Because of course, they had corporate headquarters that were time zones away. They were dealing with corporate lawyers, and it had not been a great experience for the city. So where we ended up being able to really break through was working with our local service providers. And Clatsop Community Action and Clatsop Behavioral Health had really strong on-the-ground relationships with the city. CCA through the food bank that they were operating within the city, and then CBH through mental health crisis intervention. And once we realized that our service partners had trusted relationships with the city, to a certain extent, we could be vouched for as just give them a chance. And we were able to break down those walls and really start moving it forward. And where I feel the transformation happened was from the start, where we were hitting really heavy headwinds, to, by the time we did the ribbon cutting, when we opened the building, and the whole city staff came out. And they were surprised that we built a quality building, that it wasn't an eyesore, and it had actually been, I think to their surprise, a pleasant experience, because we were able to get to know them and slow down. And I think that's kind of the key thing. I think it goes back to the patience. You can't fast forward through relationships. They need time, and you need to build trust. And as a developer, sometimes we push really hard because we're so afraid of losing funding or missing an opportunity, but somehow it always flips back on you if you don't take the time. So just, that's what I'd emphasize. And if you're an out-of-towner or you're building new relationships, that patience and that time to build trust, and then it's amazing what you can do.
So I think the part that's I'm finding the most transformational from the contractor side of things is when we partner with local firms, there's, it's not just the feel good that we're putting resources back into the community and funds back into the community, but there's a lot of benefits to hiring local. As much as a contractor, we wanna make sure that we're meeting schedule, things happen, and it's harder to have an out-of-town sub that can make changes on the fly when it comes to schedule, because they're sending crews, 2-3 hours out of town. So when you have a local contractor on board, they're more flexible, they can work around the things that just happen on construction sites with much better outcomes. There's also just the ability to, when you turn over the property to the owner, those subs that are local, they're able to respond faster if there's an issue. Mechanical systems that have an error, they're in town. That ongoing maintenance of a property is way simpler and less costly for an owner when those sub-partners are in town with them and not having to be scheduled from out of town. So for me, just really trying as much, even if the job doesn't have a local goal, doing as much as we can to try to be local really benefits the job, not only during construction, but after for the owner. And I think that's probably the biggest part of the contractor side.
Okay, thanks, Brandy. Again, talking about kind of expanding on that, the local trades, the local workforce, and how we develop it and support those folks. I think one thing we found is, as a general contractor, our lifeblood is our subcontractors and is those partnerships. So we've seen a lot of times where we've gone into out-of-town projects and we meet a new subcontractor, we vet them, and we get them started, and it actually goes really well, and then we use them again for the next project. So it's a great opportunity we found to kind of benefit to the project, to benefit to us as a general contractor, and it grows subcontractors' business. So it makes them set up to be more successful for their future. Brandy,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other.
Well, in the tail end of that, when you go into a community out of town, just try and find the local, posting so that you can advertise the job, just getting them to the table. And we'll break scopes up sometimes, like there might be a partner we talk to and we feel the scope is just too large for them as a company. But if we take this piece of it, they can handle that. And so we can break scopes up to try to bring more involvement into the job. And just the taking a risk and hiring someone that maybe we aren't confident is gonna be able to do the job, but we have internal resources as we have our own crews that do work, so we can take some risks, hire some contractors that maybe this is a real stretch for them, but we can support them and shore them up with our own people to make sure that the job is a success.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about different jurisdictions, different areas. Sometimes infrastructure can be a little unpredictable. If we've got power, or if we've got sewer or water. I think Mary, you spoke a little bit about You know, there's a plan ultimately that the city or jurisdiction may have, and it's how do we get there to end goal, or at least even start on that end goal, right? So I guess question to the group is, how do you approach challenges like easements, lack of utilities, survey of roads that we didn't know existed at Trillium, or that, yeah, nobody has survey of from 100 years ago. Yeah, question of how that works, so you guys have seen, how do you manage that process?
So that was, we definitely had some twists on the Stratus Village project. So, you know, unlike an urban project where you can mostly assume that you're gonna have utilities coming to your site or near them, on rural projects, that might be a different situation. So with Stratus, the site was flat. It was zoned properly. We had a couple of modifications that we needed, but it was largely zoned right. But we didn't have a public stormwater system. And the prior owner was a farmer who had the land farmed for a long time and came up with some arrangements with his neighbors over the time, which resulted in some underground private stormwater systems and some agreements on how different things around the area would be used in common. So those things don't show up on a public utility map. And so if you're looking for a site, be sure that you look into the site utilities, the infrastructure. Make sure you understand through easements or title reports what existing agreements have been made, and whether you can use those systems or not. You know, we at Stratus, we tapped into a private stormwater system that's used in common by 3 or 4 property owners, and it's not a real typical system these days, but we got it to work. In McMinnville, there's a private municipal electric and water company. So getting to know them was a little bit of a learning curve, understanding what their requirements are, how they do things. It's not your typical, you know, big company utility that you typically work with. So probing those questions early, so you know if they've got any particular site specifications or costs or process that are going to be important to you once you get into construction is valuable. So, you know, the site might look good as you just drive by it. There might be a lot of them out there, but make sure you do some work, really scratching the surface to understand what are you going to get yourself into if you wind up purchasing that site.
The other thing that, you know, lessons learned on Astoria is we had utilities that ran through the site, they'd been there forever, and when we came to come out to do construction and we needed to raise our power lines so that we have our clearances, not all utilities actually have easements. Some of them are just grandfathered in, and so working with the design team to figure out ways to either get a new documented easement in place, which isn't always possible because it requires approval with your neighbors that may not like your job. And so finding creative ways to accomplish the work with the utility so that you can exist within the existing non-documented easements that are just sort of, everyone knows it's there. So there's not always the formal process. You know, a lot of times in rural communities, you're working, you know, like Mike said, it's the neighbors have come to an informal agreement that's been in place for decades, and working around some of those can be a challenge. So the upfront investigation, the talking with the different utility providers and making sure everyone's clear on what is doable and what is not and what really exists.
And I was gonna say, walk around your site, not just your site. We had a huge surprise on Trillium the first winter it was in operations, where suddenly one of the ends of the property started flooding. I mean, it was literally bubbling up out of the ground. Thank goodness it was a landscaped area. But upon further investigation and moving off our site, and it never was mapped, it was never documented, but apparently when Home Depot was built, they put in a storm drain system off of their parking lot that went into a wooded area just east of our site, and it had gotten clogged. And so what was happening is it was then overflowing and bubbling into the Trillium site. And we spent a very wet morning traipsing through blackberry bushes trying to figure out where this water was coming from. And sure enough, we were able to find this huge storm drain that had just become completely covered in leaves and blackberry bushes. So I know we always walk our sites, but I just lesson learned, walk around your site as well, because it goes back to just things aren't quite, not that in the metro area it's documented either. I think that's just, take that with any site you go to. Just go and observe and look and see what's there. And if something just marks you as like, that's when you start asking questions and be curious. But yeah, that was a big surprise that nobody had record of.
I guess one thing I would add is just what I've learned over my time is a free site is never free. If a site's been there, nobody's developed it, there's a reason generally. You're gonna pay for it one way or another. It may be free, maybe donated. We got this great, city comes, we got this great piece of property. There's a reason why. Whether it's had a forced main going right through the site, they've got to build around and all kinds of configurations that the designers have to deal with, and then construction has to find a way, the least cost way to deal with it. But yeah, just generally something I've learned over my time is that you will generally pay for a free site. Okay, next question for our group here. I guess what's different about engaging the stakeholders, the community, the city in a rural community versus urban ones? Vicki?
I know in our community, I think a lot of rural communities, you have people who have lived there a long time, generations, friends for generations, know each other, went to high school there, went to college there, and getting to know them, meeting with people face to face, becoming part of that community. I've lived there my entire life, so I knew a lot of people, but I met a whole lot more people, and there's, this person, I know that person, but engaging, seeing what the needs are, listening. We, there's a branch of Chemeketa Community College near our site, so we met with them and said, hey, is there anything we can partner together? Could you have, and the hospital is right near us, is there something we can do between, you have a medical program, and then the hospital has people that need to work there, and when they, can we combine something like that? And just asking a lot of questions and meeting people and talking to them and listening and finding out where all those needs are and developing those relationships.
So a little bit more about that. So there's definitely a small town vibe with some of the projects. And so word travels fast. Everybody knows everybody. There's kind of a lot of talking about the project. So we saw that early on the front end of the Stratus Village project when we were going through some of the zoning changes and design review. And so we would monitor some of the social media just to maybe try not to get triggered by some of the comments, but just to know what people are saying so that you could tune your message. So that when you are at a public hearing, you know what some of the buzz that many people might be reading or talking about is, and you can proactively address it in your comments so that you can get out ahead of that. And so there's definitely there's a lot of talking that happens. A lot of the organizational structures in the rural communities aren't as deep. They're a little bit more flat, so you can access the leadership more easily. So you can have a relationship with the mayor, or have a relationship with the CEO of the hospital, or have a relationship with the head of the community college. You're not way down the org chart. So you can talk to the people that make the decisions in a way that makes it helpful for getting buy-in quickly. Your project might still take time, so you need that patience, but you can go right to the people who are decision makers who can say, yeah, I think that's important to us. We'll join you in whatever your effort is. So let's see a little bit about the kind of aspects of the project that influence the design and the engagement. We found that we did not build to the maximum development capacity in McMinnville. The zoning actually allowed us to do more than we did. And so you might find that particularly in kind of this climate in Oregon where there's a lot of land use focus on affordable housing, a lot of efforts to upzone and create more housing, which is generally great, could result in more supply, but you might not build to the maximum capacity. And there might be market constraints, there might be financial constraints. So you might be able to build, we could have built north of 200 units on this site, but financing that was not feasible. There wasn't enough development subsidy in the system, given Oregon Housing's rules at the time, for us to acquire the capital to build that big of a project. And it's McMinnville, bringing 200 units on at one time over time might work, but if you've got lease-up marks to hit, you want to be cognizant of what is your absorption rate going to be, and what can you successfully build and lease in your community at one time. So thinking about those realities when you're conceptualizing your project is important.
I think really in focusing on the fact that it's personal, not transactional in relationships, and where that really came to focus for me was addressing those headwinds we were getting, and relying on our partners to understand the stories about who lives in the community, who's struggling to find housing, because we were able to bring forward, these are your neighbors, these are your co-workers, these are your kids, these are friends' kids, and to be able to understand specifically what that community was grappling with and be able to put a face on it. You know, we talk so much about the buildings, and in this case, I think there was this perception, which is not unusual, around communities that affordable housing was gonna come in and it was gonna be those people and you were gonna build this really cheap building. And what we had to overcome was, it's not those people, it's your people, it's your community. And you know, time would only tell with the construction of the building. I just have to call out, we had a fantastic superintendent who was also a community relations manager, because everybody would stop by and ask questions, and that built community too. But again, if I could just distill it down to one thing, it's getting out of the transactional and making it just person to person and people to people.
Awesome, thanks, Mary. Another question to the team. How do you design and how do you build for long-term success? So go through all this development up front, the construction, and now you know, the people moved in, and yeah, how do we keep that successful, and how do we focus our efforts during pre-construction and construction, so for the long-term success?
Sure, I'll start. So the project in McMinnville is built on about 8 acres, and it's 175 units. When we started the project, we knew that we wanted the project to fit into the rural character of the community. You know, the city actually had design guidelines really into this, but we also know that we didn't want to be the tallest building around. We didn't want to stand out. And so the first iterations of designs had many buildings to be a little bit more like the character of the community. But we also realized, well, that's a lot more costly. So we've got more roofs, more foundations, more building envelope, which is more costly to build, and you've got more exterior to maintain. So over time, we kept working that to fewer buildings, but worked hard to keep the rural character, but have you know, less envelope, less roof, less foundations, and so we found that sweet spot. You know, we do have a lot of site, so keeping in mind what your landscape maintenance is going to look like is important. You know, a lot of the things that go into material selection in rural communities are probably similar to urban, so in my mind there isn't a big difference there. You know, we're doing wood frame, gable roof buildings with slab on grade. Our buildings don't have elevators. But just keeping in mind what you're building and trying to find that sweet spot between an efficient building to both construct and maintain and something that fits into the character is very important.
You know, when we were first building too, we wanted it to be a beautiful property, but it didn't have to look, but it didn't have to look like affordable housing, like you would think is affordable housing. So that was a goal early on, is when you drove by, everybody's gonna wanna live there. And it's kind of in the gateway corridor of McMinnville, so the city was very concerned about what it was gonna look like, and citizens were, and there's a grain elevator coming into town, so we kind of mimicked that, and we have these cupolas on the buildings, and it's beautiful, I really like it. But it's nice that we could use these architectural details, not the expense, to do things. One thing early on I didn't want is an elevator either, so it's 3-story walk-ups, because we have elevators at several of our projects, and they're very expensive to maintain. And then when we were looking at the cost of things, is this we're gonna spend more for this up front, but it's gonna cost us less down the road. So if we could afford it, we try to do that as much as possible. So especially now with looking at add backs, I'm looking at, is this gonna cost us less money down the road if we can add this back in? And then how is it gonna add to the well-being and just the overall livability of the tenants that live there? So adding more bicycle racks, things like that. So, and looking at how I had a lot of my team from day one involved, and I had our asset manager, and I'd always look at her and say, from an operational standpoint, what do you think? And so looking at those things as well, because that's not the side I do, that's not what I know, so I'm gonna bring her in and say, what's that, our maintenance person? Is that a problem that you have? We have a lot of people that our garbage disposals get clogged up, and that's a lot of maintenance calls. We didn't put garbage disposals in here. So just looking at those type of things so that it can be maintained easier, and the livability is better for our tenants as well.
So operations, you've heard me talk a lot about partnerships and people, but operations, that is something that you really want to think about. And I have a lesson learned that was very painful about that. But before I leave with that, it's just think about what are the building systems that you're putting in there, and who are the people that are going to maintain it. And can you design your building to have building systems that can be maintained by local contractors? And so here's the painful lesson learned. We did want to put an elevator into our building because we wanted to be able to have a high proportion of accessible units. And we ended up with a building that's kind of more of a secure double loaded corridor, single corridor down the spine of the building, and an elevator made sense. Lesson learned, think about who your manufacturer is, and think about who's gonna maintain it, because within almost weeks of getting temporary certificate of occupancy, our elevator broke down, and they sent out a service person from the Portland metro area charging us $1,000 an hour, 2 hours each direction, you can do the math, for them to be on site for 30 minutes to fix it. And it ended up being just one of those lessons learned where it's like, okay, we should have thought about that. And it's not to say you shouldn't put an elevator in. I think for me, it was thinking about, all right, so who should the manufacturer of the elevator be, and what is the local capacity to service that elevator? Because elevators are gonna break down. But they can have value if you have a senior building or you have a mobility challenge population. They make a lot of sense depending on who it is, but that was just a really great kind of moment for me to realize, okay, we need to be more intentional and more thoughtful. And think about that from your heating and cooling systems. Any kind of, we push and try to do the best, most energy efficient systems in our buildings we can, because it passes down savings overall to the residents, but at the same time, who's gonna service them? So it's always, that's just an added piece, I think, to what Mike and Vicky were talking about, where it's like, is this durable? Does this make sense? Is it easy to use? And is it gonna cost you $4,000 to have somebody just come out and spend 30 minutes on site? We did change our maintenance plan, that was the other thing I'd tell you, for overtime, and figured out a different plan. But yeah, just really think about what's your local capacity, because that's also active. That's economic development for local contractors too.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Okay, last question to our panel. What's one piece of advice that you give to others that are hoping to do impactful work in rural communities? Sure. Vicky?
Okay.
All right.
Talk to everyone. Talk to everyone that, even if you don't think, I mean, you have your partners that you work with, but then stepping outside that box and talking, and like Mike had said, we ended up in contact with a gentleman who started a winery foundation, and he's actually the one who showed us, or told us about these agricultural credits. He also said, hey, have you talked to this person? Have you talked to this person? And he still contacts us, and so that's been a great resource. And everybody we talk to, we say, hey, is there anyone else we could talk to that you could think of? And just getting that word out there, and I have to do two. The other one is patience. I'm terrible at patience, and I had no idea that when we purchased this property in 2020, we would be at this point now. I thought it would go a lot faster, and we're getting ready to move our first phase of people in mid-November, and so it's really exciting to get there. But the process from, okay, we're gonna do this, to financial closing is very long, and then once you hit financial closing, you're running.
Here's the point I'd make is find a couple of local champions that can help you. So folks that can speak on your behalf, folks that have clout or credibility in the community. For us, we had the mayor of the city of McMinnville at the time, who was a wonderful supporter of affordable housing. She did a lot of work in helping forge the partnership with the tribe. And so find those folks who can help you and bring credibility and strong voice to your job.
So I think my one piece of advice, I'm not sure is specific just to rural. I think it just should inform all of the work we do, but it's very consistent about that slowing down. And what I guess I found after doing this for a long time is people know what they need for their lives, and they don't need someone telling them. And I feel like my work and our work is all about slowing down and listening and hearing what people, and creating those environments where they can tell you what they need, because that usually will put you right on the right track to get it done in a way that is rooted and responsive to the community.
I would say hire local contractors as much as you can, but I would also say start engaging early with the utilities. There's a number of things that will turn up that you have not thought about, and you're gonna have to plan around. And the sooner you can do that, because to Vicky's point, things are slow. It takes longer to get decisions made. But getting early conversations started with the different utility providers is gonna set you up for a better success.
Okay. Myself, just in my experience, been blessed to work with everybody up here. I think the team is so core. Having a team that you trust, again, to work through the ups and the downs that happen along the way, to making these projects happen. A lot of times they take a little bit extra effort, but again, it's so worthwhile to build in these communities that really need the affordable housing. So, again, you have a team that understands that's bought in, that's going to give that extra effort to make these projects happen. I think is so key. So with that, open it up to any Q&A. Got first one in the back.
Wonderful presentation, thank you so much, and really appreciate the leaning into lessons learned. A lot of those painful feelings we received familiar. You talked a lot about relationships. Can you talk about language? So affordable housing, that works in some areas, not in others. Workforce housing, can you talk about the language you use in your relationships to make it an accessible idea to folks?
Our industry loves its acronyms. Do not use acronyms. Break it down, because I think you're bringing up an excellent point. It's like, what's workforce? What's affordable? What's low income? In the case of Trillium, you know, we had one of the great acronyms that OHCS, sorry OHCS if you're in the room, I know you love your acronyms. But we had serious and persistent mental illness units, SPMI, which was lovely. Getting out of that acronym speak, that ABC speak, and just breaking it down. Because when you say to someone SPMI or serious and persistent mental illness, you can only imagine. It's just like everyone's blood pressure in the room rose up. And suddenly, you know, everybody's like, no, get out of town. And it was breaking it down where we didn't lead with that. We led with our partnership with Clatsop Behavioral Health, who was a trusted partner in the community, and people knew people who were getting services from CBH for all different things, from addiction and recovery to mental health to a variety of other things. So I think it's, we bring it down to that personal level. It's about who the people are and what are they facing. Another thing at Trillium is we have a very high proportion of single female-headed households. And I know there's lots of people who are experiencing that too. And being able to talk about those challenges, whether it was a mom with an adult child who had mental health challenges, or whether it was a single mom raising children between 0 and 18, it was keeping it down on that level of just the story of how human beings are, and getting it out of, you know, this funding source and that funding source. You know, I stay away from tax credits and, you know, all that other SPMI and blah, 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 and just keep it to what was the need in the community we were trying to address.
The other thing I'd add, the work that we do sometimes has us working in many different states, and I can see that people have different preferences for language, or there's just different norms that they have. And so figuring out what the local vernacular is, what is the local vocabulary. When it came to working with the tribe, we got to know several of the leadership folks there pretty well. And we knew enough, and personally I knew enough to know that I didn't understand all their cultural norms and practices. And when we got to know them well, we just asked, what's your preference? What language would you like us to use? And they just told us. And so we had a nice conversation about it and told stories, and it was easy. So just asking in some instances if it's right, to figure out what do people prefer.
And as far as affordable housing, there's a lot of developments around our town and our county that, hey, this is affordable housing, and everybody's like, that's not affordable. How can someone afford to purchase that house? And then I've heard the, you know, capital A affordable, lowercase a affordable. And so just letting people know, here's what we're looking at. We're looking at people in these AMIs and, you know, explaining what it is. No, this isn't the affordable houses that are for sale over there that nobody can afford anyway. This is actually these demographics, and letting them know what the need is for those as well.
Despite the fact that we often say AMIs, and it's an easy shorthand, and everyone in this room probably knows it. You know, I found it's translating that into jobs in the community. And so rather than talking AMIs, talking jobs, or types of jobs. So people can relate to that. They can't relate to 50% AMI. It doesn't mean anything to most outside of this room. So.
I guess the one thing I would add is that I've seen on projects early on is a lot of times in the smaller communities, you get more involvement with like the neighborhood meetings, the kind of show and tell. So I think focusing on that, again, what your literature is and maybe showing what this would look like. Sometimes in the metro area, you might get one or two, well, sometimes more, one or two neighbors that are concerned about the project, but I felt like there's a lot of more involvement with neighborhood meetings and getting, again, another opportunity to get everybody on board and see what the end product is gonna look like and what the opportunities are. Anyone else? Right here?
Yeah, Eric Brinker from Tillamook County, Oregon. Mary, I appreciate that you mentioned accessibility in some of your comments, and I would appreciate if the panel could maybe discuss how you think about incorporating elements of universal design and universal accessibility into your projects, especially for providing housing choice for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So if you could speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
So I can speak for my organization. So for Northwest Housing Alternatives, we work really hard to have our units laid out with universal design principles so that they can be adaptable. We always meet the minimum code requirements, but for instance, a bathroom to make sure that there's always the floor clearance space. And then if we're doing tub showers, that we put in integrated backing into our tub shower units and blocking into the walls so that we're set up if a resident needs to be able to put in grab bars, for instance, or a shower seat. Definitely, so I'm working on a senior project right now that's under construction here in town. And we went a step farther wherein we have again our type A, sorry the acronym speak, but the fully built out accessible units, but every single other unit has break front cabinets so that we can pull out to be able to have the roll under space in both the bathroom and the kitchen. We had universal design through all of the units, and again, all of this integral backing built into the walls to be able to install grab bars. So it's just kind of, I think, become part of our ethos that we've learned over time that building in those key pieces into our buildings helps us over the long haul. If somebody wants to age in place and stay, our residents stay a really long time in our buildings, and chances are they are aging or going through who knows what life may bring that could bring around mobility issues. So that's kind of NHA's approach.
I would just say as a contractor, we just do what we can to support so a lot of times we're going back after tenants have come to the building and they've got various needs or there's accommodations that need to be met. So again, just trying to be flexible and be there to support our teams, support who ends up being the manager for the site, and to be able to help the tenants and what their needs are. But building in those things while we're in construction, so again there's flexibility depending on the tenants.
And along with that, we have preferences for the SPMI also, and we have those for tribal members and for agricultural workers. But we didn't set those as fixed units, so they're all floating units. So this unit is not going to be known as, that's the person who has a mental health issue, or that's the person that's tribal. So having those units be flexible and be floating so that it's not just narrowing down somebody and identifying them as anything that they don't want to be.
Okay. We have another question out there, yep?
I do, thank you. There is some curiosity in the rural communities from some of our minority businesses that could be local use, who might be interested in trying to become MWESB certified, or might be able to be more, you guys might be selective perhaps in that selection process, What would there be in the way of tooling for them so that they might be able to stand out in that, in that process? And how could they, what resources available to them? A, language. B, what does your construction offer to be able to assist them through that process? And what does that look like in rural communities compared to the urban metro areas?
Yeah, so when we go out to bid on a job, we do our best to try to advertise in local publishing so that the people in the community know that the job is coming. One of the things that we've at Walsh have been doing is we set up what we call sort of an office hours, where it's a time where as a project manager, I am just available and I set up a meeting, the invite is part of the bid notice, and I will be at my computer for that 2 or 3 hours on a Teams meeting, and people can just drop in and ask questions. So local subcontractors can get, they can drop into that appointment meeting and ask questions, maybe specific to the scope they're looking at, or just, if I bid this, I can only take this portion, is it even make sense for me to do that? And we can work through and talk about any of the concerns or any of the project aspects that might be a challenge or something that's really an asset that, you bidding this would be awesome. Like, definitely make sure you turn your pricing in. We have lots of conversations with people about the potential of being an MWSB certified. We can point them in the right direction, and we also have additional resources within the company that we can kind of suggest you contact Acton. But it's making yourself available, reaching out. I did the whole blue book, or not blue book, but yellow pages. Kind of what are the local companies and who do I talk to make sure that they're aware that this job is coming, because it's really hard to get a striper at the beach in December. So, who are the local players, and making sure that you're just available and that you're able to address concerns. And we do piece out scopes, like we will purposely take, whatever, painting, and okay, you guys have a small crew, you can accommodate, this portion of the job. Maybe you only are doing interior, and you don't have the ability to access a 3-story building. That's not in your forte. So we'll give that to a different company, but you can work on this part because it fits more of your company's dynamic at this point, because you're still growing, or you have a workforce issue. Feels like a follow-up to that.
Well, I'm just thinking about how does it help the local community, because there's this criteria of a benchmark to make. How does it open up the door of opportunity for more local vendors to be able to assist with the criteria of the benchmark that has to be made for OHCS funded, MWESB, and COVID certified, as well as being able to utilize the individual local vendors?
So I was just gonna say, for rural work, OHCS does not require, you can self-certify for an MWESB, and then what happens is it still counts towards that benchmark, but it gets in the OHCS system where there are, and I know there are some of those folks here attending the conference, but who can talk about how the resources they have to then help certify the buildings, or certify the subcontractors. But you can self-certify in rural work without that state certification, which I think is really important to get those local businesses who haven't gone through the process.
I would just say that, yeah, as a general contractor, it's our job to kind of lay out what, and sometimes those can be conflicting, right? Local versus MWSB. But I do think that there's opportunities. We've got a great success story at Stratus Village. A painter I worked with 2 years ago in Lincoln City was painting under another company. They said, hey, we want to do more work with you. And they're doing their largest project ever, and we got them certified as a minority sub. And they're doing Stratus Village for us, so over $1 million contract for them. They've never done anything close to that, but again, we're supporting them. But yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to a conversation with the team, And you've got to kind of lay out those different tracks to meet, you know, what the funding requires, and then also getting that local business is key to making these projects successful.
Thank you.
See, anyone else? Questions? Feel free.
So thinking about this from the side of the local government, if you had like a mayor or a city manager that really wanted to do housing development in their community, what tips would you give them maybe as someone that's known to do that and from a housing authority perspective too, especially from the developer's perspective? If the community is kind of pretty stagnant or like distressed or not a lot of development, maybe they do have a free parcel of land. But yeah, tips for how they would approach you.
NHA, we end up actually lots of times responding to requests for qualifications and requests for proposals from smaller jurisdictions, who go out and say, you know, we've got this parcel of land and we have these housing goals, and we're looking for a developer partner to be able to develop it. And I would say, you know, we have a project that's just about ready to close and get underway in construction in Sisters that was achieved that way. You know, we have a number of projects around the state that way, so I would say that's kind of a low lift start, is just getting a simple qualification or proposal out there with what you're thinking, and see if you can get, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit developer partner who can come in and be your think partner in trying to see if there's a there and put a project together.
And to add to that, internally within the local government, if the leadership can project the importance of affordable housing and encourage any department head to think as creatively as they can, about rules, about fees, about things that cost time and money to a project. So that for the staff folks who know this is an important project and we're gonna do something for this project in the interest of its success that we might not do for everyone. So if you can systematize that and send that message internally, I think that helps.
Okay. Any other questions? We're about time here, so I want to say thank you to all. Thank you to our panelists here, and yeah, have a great day. Wish you luck.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
I did a Zoom interview, and then when I got here, I realized I could